Welcome to the evening show with Jackie Brambles. This is the home of great conversations with your favourite living legends of the 70s, 80s and 90s. And we certainly have a guest tonight who lives up to that label and then some. It's been almost 50 years since Devilgate Drive went to number one for the leather jumpsuit-clad Suzi Quatro. And to this day, she is still touring, still selling out her gigs, and her most recent album, a collaboration with Katie Tunstall, was released to huge critical acclaim this year. And we're just thrilled she's joining us tonight for our great conversation. Great to have you on the show, Suzi.
How you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
Yeah, great. Thank you very much.
I love the background there. How many gold platinum discs are on your wall? I'm getting dazzled.
That's only one part of the wall. That's just one side of the wall. This is my dining room, and it goes for the whole dining room, and all the singles are in my office. So yes, I've got a few.
You certainly do. And hopefully be adding to that, because you've got a new project, a new record that you've done with Katie Tunstall, teamed up with her.
Yeah, actually, we're really proud of that. I picked up an award on our behalf about 6 weeks ago, Album of the Year from Jules Holland. We got together, we did a album show that we both appeared on at Hyde Park. And then I was actually watching my documentary of Suzi Q. And I was a fan of hers. But all of a sudden she popped up on my documentary and I went, oh, I had no idea she was a fan of mine too. So the guy that did the footage, if you've seen it, from Shine a Light,
yeah,
the first track single, he was a fan of mine since I began and a fan of hers. So he said, would you like me to arrange a meeting? I said, yes. So she called me and invited me to have lunch with her in London at the studio where she was recording. We were there for about a half an hour. She said, can I send you a link? I have a riff that I'm working on. I'd love you to write it with me. Yeah, so she did that. We wrote 2 songs remote, and then something was happening, and I knew it. So I invited her down to the house, and she stayed here about 3 or 4 days, and that's where it started. We sat on the ground. And the first song we wrote was Truth Is My Weapon. So, I mean, you got to be kidding me.
Wow.
So it was obviously, I know, we just connected, we talked a lot, and we had a lot of shared experiences, and yeah, and we became very good friends in the process.
As you said, you became aware of Katie being a fan of yours through the documentary about you called Suzi Q, which I highly recommend our listeners watch if they get the chance. It really does show what a pioneer you've been to generations of women in the music industry, from Deborah Harry to Joan Jett, and of course up to and including Katie Tunstall. And I guess the common thread really across the generations and the cultures and all the different journeys is quite simply that you are all musicians to your core.
The thing is, we're both very much songwriters. We're both ensconced in the industry. We're both artists. We're both difficult.
Really?
Yeah, we're difficult, we're complicated, and we're deep feeling. So we share a lot of sort of connections, What I found as we were getting to know each other was, and she agrees with this, I'm an in the fire kind of girl. I don't avoid a problem. I walk right into it, let it burn and walk out. And she observes the fire, right? And writes about it. So I pulled her into the fire, made her burn. She pulled me out of the fire and showed me that I didn't have to burn all the time. So this is what we shared with each other. But we really became emotionally naked during the writing of this album. It was really quite something. And the critics, as I'm sure you've read, you're in the business, have been ridiculous.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, people absolutely love this album.
Oh, I said that to KT when we were talking just recently. I said, people aren't liking this album. People are loving this album.
Truth is my weapon. It's the only one I've got. You got truth as your weapon.
Suzi Quatro and Katie Tunstall. That's Truth as My Weapon from their recent album, Face to Face. So that's your most recent project here in the present. But as you know, Suzi, what we like to do in our great conversations is to go way back to figure out some of the key musical influences, what they've been and who they've come from and how they've influenced you along the way. I know that you come from an extremely musical family, right?
Yeah, I was born and raised in Detroit, and my father was a musician all his life. He was a child prodigy on violin. He had 5 kids with my mom, and we all, I can't even brag about it, we all play minimum 3 instruments each. So that's...
Wow.
That's the way we were brought up. I was trained on classical piano and percussion. So I read and write both those. And then at 14, when we started the band, I was given the bass to play, and I taught myself that, and that became my main instrument.
And what would you have been sort of absorbing around you? You know, when you were too young to actually pick music for yourself, what would you have been hearing around you?
Yeah, that would have been. Well, I mean, I brought up listening to my dad's music first. I went to his shows, whenever he played, and then luckily, because I had an older brother and sisters, I heard everything from poppy music from the 50s onwards. So I got all my dad's music, 20s, 30s, 40s, and then the poppy music from the 50s onwards. Well, my sister Arlene, she played all that sort of right from the doo-wop and the Elvis, like the Fleetwoods, Come Softly to Me.
Come softly, darling. Come softly, darling.
All the Elvis stuff. And then my brother, he's 2 years younger, his stuff took over. And then my sister Patty, she had her records locked in a record box in her room. And I found the key. So as you do, the first record I bought, and you see, that's going to be way back in time. I mean, I'm 73 now. So I bought Bobby Darin's You Must Have Been a Beautiful Baby.
Whoa, you must have been a you must have been a beautiful baby.
Number 10 in 1961, that's You Must Have Been a Beautiful Baby by Bobby Darin, the first record ever bought by an 11-year-old Suzi Quatro growing up in Detroit. And we will continue to track the most meaningful musical memories of our special guest as our great conversation with Suzi Quatro continues next. Welcome back to the evening show with Jackie Brambles. This is the great conversation with our very special guest, a trailblazer for female musicians and a legend in her own right. Suzi Quatro is our special guest tonight. Before the break, Suzi, we heard a little bit about your super talented family and a childhood that was steeped in music. So was it a foregone conclusion then for you that your future was without doubt going to be as a professional musician?
Oh, God, yeah. And in fact, it's a funny story. I've told it before, but it's a true story. The family used to sit down in America, all families, at 8 o'clock on a Sunday night and watch the Ed Sullivan Show, which was a variety show. And
right.
At the end of the show, he would always bring up somebody for the youngsters. He used to say, now something for the youngsters. And it was always somebody more like pop or whatever it was, at the time.
Yeah. This
particular time I was 5.5 years old, and the whole family's there as usual. And my eldest sister, who was the oldest, she's 9 years older than me, so she was 14.5. And he brings on Elvis.
Oh.
And he starts doing Don't Be Cruel, an indelible mark on my soul, because my elder sister starts to scream. And I'm too young to know why she's screaming. So I'm looking at it. What's the matter with you? And then I looked into the screen. I never forget it. And I was drawn in like a magnet. And in my little 5.5-year-old brain, I said to myself, I'm going to do that. It's crazy.
You know I can be found sitting home.
So, I mean, I hear that I've heard people remembering seeing Elvis, and also when they first saw the Beatles, that same thing, like life changed.
Yeah, well, Beatles was both times changed my life. Ed Sullivan Show. Then in 64, we watched the Ed Sullivan Show again, and on came the Beatles.
All right.
And as soon as they were finished, it's funny, both from the Ed Sullivan Show, as soon as they were finished playing, we got on the phone, my sister Patty and me. She's the one next oldest to me. And we called our 2 friends who were sisters and another girl whose father was in my dad's band.
Right.
And we were, ooh, ah, ooh, ah, ooh, ah, ooh, ah. And Patty said, let's form a band, an all-girl band. We were, yeah. So it's that show changed my life 2 times. So we started a band, and all the girls picked an instrument, and I didn't speak quick enough, which is very unlike me. And Patty said, "You're playing the bass." So that's how I got the bass.
Oh yeah.
So, inspired by seeing the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan TV show in 1964, watching at home in Detroit with your family, you and your sisters then form a band called the Pleasure Seekers. And were you pretty serious about it?
The band was a working band. I went right on the road. I was only 14, left school at 15. My dad allowed me to. We were popular because we were unique. We were all girls, so we got a lot of work. We did 5 shows a night, 45 on, 15 off. We worked hard. We learned our craft, you know. We had different sets. We had our Motown set. We had a top 40 set. We had a Beatles set. We had a Stone set. We had an English Invasion set. We had all this different stuff. And we were a show band. So I was the main person out the front playing my bass. I used to call myself Suzie Soul. And I loved Otis Redding at that point in my life.
But inevitably, things changed in the band. The group changed its style and its name to Cradle. And you didn't fare so well from that change, right?
The Pleasure Seekers had changed, had morphed into Cradle, because everybody wanted to get serious and write our own songs. And it was festivals starting to happen. And we were kind of stuck in that show busy show band racket, which wasn't really happening. So they pushed me to the back.
Right.
I became really just a bass player. I did maybe 4 or 5 songs a night. My little sister came in to be singer, and she's a very good singer and more in that generation. And Mickie Most came to Detroit to record at Motown.
And for those who don't know, Mickie Most was kind of the Simon Cowell of his day. He was responsible for a lot of the British musical invasion in the States and behind the careers of many, many big stars like Lulu, Hot Chocolate, The Animals, Jeff Beck, and of course yourself.
Yes, correct, yeah. And he came and saw the band, and I got up and did only 2 songs. And he called me to the back of the hall and he said, "How would you like to come to England and make an album with me?"
Wow.
And that was my time to go.
And you had no hesitation. You thought, "Yep, I'm off."
Emotionally, I had a lot of hesitation. I was leaving my home and my family and my band. But, you know, really, professionally, it's a no-brainer. This was my shot. And it was actually the second solo offer I'd had in the same week. Elektra Records also offered me a solo contract. So it was my time.
It was definitely your time. And who would have been, Suzie, sort of a few years ahead of you in terms of like a female artist? Would there be anybody that you'd have, who was established when you were still unknown, who you were thinking, yeah, that's what I want to do, or that's how I want to be, or follow in those footsteps? Would there have been any sort of role models in that sense?
I'm the role model. I had to make it up as I went along. There was no girls doing what I did. A bass player, rock and roll singer. Are you kidding? And it wasn't until, again, my documentary, Suzi Q, came out, and I snuck into the theater. I was booked in for the Q&A, snuck into the theater, because I wanted to experience it with an audience on the big screen. And girl after girl after girl after girl. Debbie Harry, Chrissy Hind, Joan Jett, KT, Kathy Valentine, Tina Weymouth, Lita Ford, at different times came out and said the same thing. You know, if you paraphrase it, they said, we would not have done what we did had Suzi Quatro not done it first. And then I started to cry.
I'll bet.
Because I had not realized, to be honest, that I had done anything that different until I saw this documentary.
Can the Can, Suzi Quatro's debut single in the UK, which went all the way to number 1 in 1973. So as you were saying, Suzie, you know, you were this pioneer, which you only realised quite recently after seeing the documentary about you called Suzi Q. But there were no female rock role models for you. So what about male artists then that inspired you?
Definitely Otis Redding. I adored him. Elvis Presley, for sure. He stayed around for my whole life. I love Dion. I love Bob Dylan. Huge Bob Dylan fan. I loved his lyrics. I used to recite his lyrics in my basement to anybody I could grab down there with the incense burning. It's really sad. And then if I thought they weren't listening, I would start all over again so people learned how to fake it.
Knock, knock, knocking on.
all those kind of 60s people. See, I was a 60s teenager, so my influences would have been all the 60s people, and a lot of the 50s too, I gotta say.
But I mean, you obviously, when you became a professional musician and were produced by Mickie Most, had a lot of contact with your peer group who were all male. You were a support act for Alice Cooper, weren't you?
Yeah, we're good friends. I've known her since I've been 15. Yeah, long time. I broke his nose one time.
How'd that happen?
She's smiling sweetly. We were on the Welcome to My Nightmare tour, 80 shows, and it was just, you got crazy. So many shows. We had done 30 before that of our own before we joined the tour, so kind of crazy. And we had a dart gun fight, a rubber dart gun fight, and it even moved out into the hallway. We had mattresses out, people were bang, 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 and Alice was hiding behind a television. And I'm a really, really, really good shot. And he stuck his nose out to see where I was, and it went point. And so he had a black eye and a broken nose, and he wore my T-shirt that night on stage out of respect.
Doesn't get much more rock and roll than that. I love that.
It is rock and roll.
Taking out Alice Cooper in a gunfight. That is fantastic. I love that. And I mean, do you remember, like, for example, the first time that you would have been on Top of the Pops? And as an American, had you been here long enough to realize what a big deal that was?
Yeah. I got raised in 71. So 73 was my first big hit. So it was about 18 months. Yeah. And I knew the Top of the Pops is important. In fact, Mickie called me. He had to go to America the first week I was on, and he called me from America. And he said, Suzie, I want the performance of a lifetime. I said, okay.
No pressure.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. I knew what he wanted, and I gave it.
Do you remember that first show or one of the early shows, and the first time you sort of would have been bumping into? Because I'm looking on the database here, and your friend Alice Cooper was on that same first show with you. So was Paul McCartney and Wings. So was Wizard.
Oh my gosh, yeah, Wizard. Yeah, I remember all of them. Yeah, it was cool. I was bumping into all of these pieces. Some of them I know Paul anyway, but Wizard, Roy Wood came on my This Is Your Life in 1999, and I told him on the show that I knocked him off number one with Can They Can. I just sort of put it out.
And he forgave you.
He did. He couldn't believe he said it on the show, though. He was there to honor me. That's my sense of humor.
Knocked off the number one spot with See My Baby Jive by Suzi Quatro's Can the Can in 1973. That is Wizard, and we'll be back to continue this fascinating, great conversation with the legendary Suzi Quatro next. Welcome back to the evening show with Jackie Brambles. We are so pleased tonight to be joined by an absolute trailblazer for women in music, particularly women in rock music. Before Suzi Quatro appeared in a black leather jumpsuit, rocking out with her bass guitar, a lone female in that male-dominated world at that time, nobody knew it was even possible. I distinctly remember seeing her, and I was only 6 years old at the time, as I'm sure many of you were, obsessed with Top of the Pops. And just when you watched her, something shifted in the possibilities of what women could do. Of course, Suzie, you would be oblivious to the impact that you were having at that time. You were far too young to realize all the implications that were going on. You'd just be coping with the overnight fame that an appearance on Top of the Pops could bring.
Funny enough, after our first appearance on Top of the Pops, we watched it. We were living in a little flat, my ex-husband and I, and he was my guitar player too. And we went out to the pub for a drink, our local pub around the corner. And as I walked in the door, I got mobbed. There she is. I went, what? There who is, and I think it was about 48 hours maximum. I went through this little thing they call the ego trip. And I think you must pass through it. It's a rites of passage.
Right.
And I remember thinking, oh, I'm great, and the champagne arriving for the record company, and people calling me for my opinion on things and photographs and interviews. And it was about 48 hours. And I woke up in the morning and I looked in the mirror looked at myself and I said, "You jerk." So, back down to earth with a bang. And I sat at the coffee table with my ex, and he very wisely said, in his Essex accent, "Welcome back, Suze." And I don't regret having to do that. You should. And I recognized it for what it was. And I've never gone even near that again. I'm very down to earth girl, but you do have to go through that little craziness for a few hours,
Well, yeah, you did well to do for a few hours. There are some artists that get stuck there for an awful long time, and some for whom they never recover from it, and and they come to a sticky end.
Well, I've got in my home. It's on the third floor, and it's called an ego room.
Right.
And you go up 2 flights of stairs, and on the third floor, it's a real crooked walls. It's an old house. So it's really like an analogy. You can really bang your head, and then you finally come to a big, heavy wooden door, and I have a plaque made, and it says, "Ego room, mind your head." And you go in, and the first thing you see is a big red book. This is your life. And it's the quietest. I love it that it's the quietest room in the house. The ego room is the quietest room in the house. And you go up there, you can look at your videos, your old 8-tracks, your scrapbooks, all the things on the wall. You can do everything up there, everything Suzie. In fact, everything of the eras. And then the important thing is when you leave that room, you shut that door.
And that's it.
That's it.
You don't take it. You don't take it around with you in a backpack.
No, my real honest to God attitude is that just because I've been lucky enough to be successful at my chosen profession, which it is, it doesn't mean I'm better than anybody else. And that's kind of the way I feel about things.
Well, I've seen you before on that discotheque floor. You were driving me. If you can't give me love.
I think it might be my favorite Suzi Quatro track. If You Can't Give Me Love got to number 4 in 1978. And of course, in America, you're known here for being an excellent actress, but in America, you are best known as being a musician, but a fictional character by the name of Leather Tuscadero on Happy Days.
Sunday, Monday, happy days.
I've read a story that you were offered the part after Gary Marshall, the producer, saw a poster of you on his daughter's bedroom wall. Is that true?
That's true. It was, she had a collage of Rolling Stone covers.
Right.
So, the magazine. And I was on the cover of the Rolling Stone. I love saying that. And they couldn't find the girl to play this part. They had the script for a long time. They wanted somebody who was tough but vulnerable, could act, and maybe could sing. So they were looking for a certain type. And he saw the picture and he said, "That's who we want." Who was that? And they called me up in Japan. And they said, would I fly to America and audition, which I did, and I got the part. It was for 3 seasons and really, really good. And in fact, America more discovered Suzi Quatro through Leather Tuscadero. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Stumbling In was a huge hit there. It was a million seller. And I had lower end chart ones, like All Shook Up was lower end, Can the Can, Can't Give Me Love was lower end. But they didn't have all those string of singles that they had everywhere else in the world.
Right.
But then they discovered me through that show. And then they realized that I was actually Suzi Quatro. So that's the only country in the world that happened in.
Isn't that's extraordinary. And have you had sort of experiences of meeting musical peers that you've enjoyed or collaborated with?
I'm trying to think who I played with. I played with ZZ Top.
Oh, wow. Oh, I can see that, yeah.
And in fact, when I first went back to Detroit with my English band with hits under my belt,
yeah,
I was supported by Blue Oyster Cult and Kiss.
Wow.
Played with Rufus. Played with them in the Whiskey before they got famous.
Right.
Tom Petty, big fan of his. I did Breakdown on one of my albums. And then in the 90s, my husband now for 30 years, he promotes a lot of big shows, and he always was booking artists from the 60s, 70s, and 80s and putting them all together. So I played with everybody. I played with absolutely everybody. God, I'm trying to think of names now. Played with the Tremolos. I played with Dave D. Dozy McIntitch. I played with Slade. I played with Sweet. I played with, God, everybody you could think of. he put on these shows. Middle of the road, God, who else? Mamas and Papas. They were great. Yeah, they were great.
All the leaves are brown, leaves are brown.
Before we let you go, we always like to get our guest artists to pick the final track of the hour. And it can either be because you know the artist, or the song is significant for you personally, or just that as a songwriter you think it's perfection, just something that's really stayed with you.
I know which one I want to pick then, and it's Bob Dylan, who I am a huge fan of, and it's "To Make Me Feel Your Love," to make you feel my love. Sorry, to make you feel my love, because it's irresistible.
When the rain is blowing in your face, to make you feel my love.
I bet you thought that was an Adele original. Come on, admit it. No, my friends, that was written by Bob Dylan in 1997, 11 years before Adele had that hit. And that was the final track of tonight's great conversation, as chosen by our very special guest tonight, Suzi Suzi Quatro, who's not quite ready to wrap it up for Christmas yet, right? You've still got some shows to do first, Suzi.
Yeah, I've got Helsinki and Lithuania. And then these four shows I just did in the UK. I did the Palladium on the 15th, so a couple weeks ago. They went so good that now we're going to do another big one next year. And the reviews, my God, the reviews of these four shows, in your dreams you can't write it. Just, my husband was actually in tears.
Oh, how amazing.
Oh, it was so sweet. He read one of the reviews and he went, "Now I can die happy."
You're in Gateshead, I think, on the 14th of December, it says. Is that right?
Yes, Gateshead, that's right.
And then off to Australia in the new year.
Yeah, and that's my 38th tour there.
Wow.
You can't fathom it, can you? 38 times to Australia. Jeez.
And when can your British fans next? Will you be gigging next year here in the UK?
That will be probably towards the end of the year next year. We'll be doing a UK tour.
Fantastic. Suzi, what a pleasure. Absolutely brilliant to speak with you. Wishing you nothing but the best for the coming year. Thank you for taking the time.
My pleasure, and thank you very much.
All the best. Take care now.
Bye.
What an honour to have such an inspiring and pioneering woman on the evening show for our great conversations. Suzi Quatro, amazing.